Om Shanti. Good evening. Our theme is, I think, being an unlimited server. Is that the theme? Okay. Something with unlimited service. And obviously from Baba's Murli and, of course, Daddy picking up on the theme, Baba's pushing us very strongly in that direction. But of course we need to understand our limitations to go beyond them. And sometimes Maya is so wonderful and so clever that it makes us think that the limited stage is unlimited. I recently had the fortune of being away for Baba's service for 2-3 weeks. And before I left London, I spoke to Daddy on the phone and to take leave. And she said to me, what are the words? Become an image that grants visions and go and do service. Don't go with the intoxication of service. And it was just great for her to give me that reminder, because over the years I have become fairly detached about service and doing things, but this was a little bit of a new experience, so there was that little bit of a feeling, oh, you know, this is going to be a bit of an adventure. And of course Daddy picks up everything, Daddy Janki, and so she picked up that there was that little bit of intoxication to go for Baba's service. And so just in that phrase, in that comment to me, she was wanting to move me from the limited to the unlimited. Because when we think about what is the limited, it's something that really is connected to your identity, your image, your needs, what you have to do, any thoughts that move in that sort of horizontal direction. And so sometimes then when you're serving, you'll think first about what people need and what you should say and what should be done, and then you think about Baba after that. And it's not that it's wrong to consider the situation and understand what the need is, etc. And obviously talking about all of this very much from experience. But if you're working in an unlimited way, then in everything it's first Baba and then everything else. And sometimes we really do get things the wrong way round. And that's where Daddy says that sometimes we confuse what it is that we have to do and what it is that God has to do. So we think that we have to go in and fix things, but that's Baba's job. We think that Baba has to somehow transform us and create our stage, and that's our job. And then we wonder why things aren't working. In the Murlis that Baba's been giving, Baba's been really emphasizing the fact that it is possible, it really is possible to make everything very, very easy if you move into the unlimited. And the very easy way of moving into the unlimited and making things easy is really to enjoy Baba's love and accept Baba's love into yourself and into your heart. I was very touched. I think it was then, what date? It must have been the 30th of November, where Baba said, I don't want you to labour. I have so much love for you that I want to make effort for you. And I was very touched because I thought, such a father who will do anything for the children. And I think it was in today's morning class that Daddy was talking about how Brahma Baba as a father, well, the humility of Brahma Baba, putting everything on Shiv Baba, but how he would say, Sakar Baba would say to her, well, you know, this is not your work. This is the work that you have to do. And how if a child is studying well and they're bright, the parents will say, but you don't have to, you know, you don't have to do that physical work. You save your time for this. And that really touched me, that how a father like that will sacrifice himself to the children and really, with that love, want to do everything to move the child forward. And I've also witnessed with Daddy Janki very much. I know it's with all the daddies, but particularly, of course, Daddy Janki I've been with over a long period of time, that when a soul comes to her and with a lot of honesty speaks of what's going on in their heart and signals their deep desire for their own self-progress, then it's as if she'll move heaven and earth to facilitate that. And I think some of you here have that experience, right? Look at Dad, actually. So it's like she'll say, okay, here's the child with that love and that honesty, and she'll just do whatever she can. It's on Baba's behalf. It's Baba doing it. It's Baba giving her that right to do that for us. And so this is where I always see how the daddies are in limited service, because they don't come into any sort of limitation in terms of limiting their giving with any kind of conditions at all. Sometimes when we're on the service field, and I know it happens for me, we sometimes in a gross way, but sometimes in a subtle royal way, we then react to other people's sanskars, don't we? Or nobody here reacts to and this is our big, what can I say, our big challenge to really be above the limited, above the reactions of the sanskars to the sanskars of others. And I've observed for myself how, and this was mentioned in a blessing actually last week or the week before, never cut anybody off, that's totally wrong. And when you even have a little bit of an impression of somebody's sanskars, negative or positive, then somehow, either you, if it's a negative impression, you in a subtle way would rather not have to deal with that person, and so you'd rather put them to one side. And sometimes, I don't know about you, you sort of wish that they'd go somewhere else for service. And so in a way, what are you doing? You're cutting the soul off and you're creating a barrier, and that vibration's going to reach them, so how on earth are they going to transform? And then if you have a positive impression of a soul, what happens is that you then have, even if it's subtly, a bias towards them, and you push that soul forward in everything. And then of course what's the result of that? You then subtly cut off others, because they get that vibration that, well, you're pushing this one forward, and so in your eyes the other one I have less value. It's a very subtle things. And when I was coming through Delhi a few weeks ago, I was at ORC, and so I had the chance to go across to see Daddy Gulzar. And I was actually talking to Daddy Gulzar about this, because there'd just been a situation where I felt there had been that little bit of bias towards somebody, and it had caused a little bit of friction. And you know how the daddies say very simple things to you. She just said to me, she said, yes, it's very important to be very aware of this. And she said, treat everyone the same. And that phrase became a homework for me as a signal for how to really implement on a practical level this whole subject of unlimited service. Treat everyone the same. I thought this is a very, very powerful homework for me. Yes, of course, in our interactions with people, depending on the person, the situation, of course you're going to be interacting in a different way with people. But if you look deep inside at your own attitude and your own feelings, then to treat everyone the same is exactly what Baba's been telling us in the Muralis, to stay in my state of self-respect, to give respect to others, and to value others equally. And every soul is valuable, no matter what their sanskars and no matter what they're doing. And I don't really know inside. I mean, Daddy today was saying that she would challenge Baba. Baba, you are a thought reader. You are Jani Jananhar. You are the one who... Oh no, sorry, it was in the morning session with the youth. Baba would say, I'm not Jani Jananhar, the one who knows the secrets in the hearts of others. And Daddy would challenge Baba and say, what do you mean you're not? Point a finger at Baba and say, but nobody else knows my heart, but you know my heart. You see the things in my heart and you pull them out and you tell me. And I also remember once going to Daddy early in the morning here in Madhavan many years ago, and it had come up in the Murli the day before, Baba isn't Jani Jananhar. And I just went to Daddy and I said, Daddy, Baba is, isn't he? And she just nodded. So, Baba knowing us, but we are not that. We don't know what's going on in the hearts of others. So we really actually don't have any basis for giving any soul more value or less value, or more respect or less respect. That then becomes actually a lack of self-respect on our part, because it's something that works from our own ego. And what is ego? A lack of self-respect. Because when there's self-respect, there isn't ego, there's humility and there's love. And when we want to move from the limited to the unlimited, Baba mentioned today in the blessing that along with service there's renunciation and tapasya. And renunciation of what? Many levels of renunciation. But if we're really looking at the renunciation that goes along with the tapasya, that brings us into that state where we truly can be unlimited servers, then the renunciation is the renunciation of I, yes, I-ness, ego, I and mine. And that's again what Baba's been emphasizing so much through this season's Murlis. And I loved what Dadi Gulzar said about ego when she was in London a couple of years ago. She said, ego means go. Go. And so that makes me light when I think about ego and say, oh no, I've again done something out of my ego. Okay? Go. And so that renunciation, but what does it mean in practical terms, the renunciation of I? It means renunciation of certain feelings inside and certain thoughts inside. And it actually means, I've discovered in my own research inside, it actually means renunciation of a lot of imagination. And more and more when I, as we all are doing, try to uncover those subtle layers of ego and say, okay, Baba, where next, Baba? And you go to Baba, and then when you have those beautiful feelings from Baba, it enables you to understand actually what the unlimited feelings are or the lesser feelings are. And I've begun to understand how much we live on imagination. And in particular, we live on imagination of what we think other people think. Have you noticed that? How much of your time is taken up subtly watching what other people may be doing or how other people are reacting to you? Is it a fact? No? Yes? Yes? And when we're doing that, of course, we are extroverted. We are in the limited realm, the horizontal connection. And we are in the realm of a lot of imagination. And sometimes when that imagination, that bubble of imagination is burst, we realize how much time we've wasted in those limited thoughts. It was Els telling me today that story that she went to join something and she thought Daddy would say to her, "What are you doing here?" And Daddy saw her and then called her and arranged for somebody to translate. That was imagination, right? I always thought that, someone's going to tell me off. I remember when I was first in, and these are little things, but they waste our time, basically. And I remember when I was in London, first 3 years when I moved to London, and I really struggled. I was very stressed out with the work. I didn't know what to do. And all the time I had this imagination that if I went to Daddy, and of course Daddy could see what was happening, but sometimes when the seniors see, they have to wait for you to say, they can't just interfere. And I used to think, if I go to Daddy and say I can't cope, she'll throw me out and send me back to where I came from. And of course she wouldn't at all. But we put ourselves under a lot of pressure because of that imagination of what we imagine others think. And then sometimes I say to myself, am I so important that every single person around me is only thinking about me? It's a fact that they're not. But it's just us living in that imagination, that world of imaginary thinking of how other people are responding to us. And it's that which, what I said at the beginning, makes us think about others first and then Baba in service, rather than Baba first and then giving to others in an appropriate way. And something else that Daddy Gozar said to me in that little chat was that, if there's anything extra in here, how can Baba fill you with what it is that you need? There's no room. And I think many of you will know that Buddhist story, where the disciple came for tea with the master, and the master came to see the master, and the master said, "Okay, I'll give you a cup of tea." And he started filling up the cup with tea, with pouring from the teapot. And then the cup was full, but the master kept pouring and pouring. So, of course, consequently, the cup was overflowing, and the disciple said, "Master, Master, what are you doing? The cup's full. Why are you still pouring tea into it?" And he said, "Well, this is like your intellect. It's already full, and so whatever I teach you, nothing more will fit in." And it was interesting that a little while ago, I was with Daddy and Sister Genti, and I don't know what we were talking about in some context, but I said to them, I'm grateful that there are times when you have just kind of let me go along and make mistakes and learn my own lessons, and you haven't said anything to me, and you've just sort of supported me, and you just let me go along and not said anything. And then Gentleman said to me, "But we did say to you, you just didn't listen." And so then I was definitely like that cup that it's already full with your own stuff. So you try to pour anything else in, and your own imagination, your own ego, your own weakness, your own waste thoughts is just filling the intellect and the mind so much that you can't absorb anything from Baba. And so it's important that we keep ourselves free and we keep our mind free to take in what it is that Baba wants to give. And in one of the classes recently we were talking about what it means to allow Karan Karavanhar to work. How is it that Baba can become Karan Karavanhar through us? And then I just thought, well, all that Baba needs is a quiet mind, a still mind. And if my mind's racing here and there, then Baba can't do the work of Karan Karavanhar. Then I won't be a useful instrument, a useful vessel through which Baba can work. But if I keep my mind free, then that's the moment at which Baba can use me as an instrument to do something, to touch someone, whatever it may be. And that's up to him. He knows his work. I don't have to think about that. I don't have to put my mind into that. And in a way, this brings me to another quality that I feel is very important in enabling us to move from the limited through to the unlimited. And that quality is faith, but also trust. How can I trust Baba so completely so that I really do leave everything to Baba and I don't carry the burden of the service, the work, the task, whatever it is, and or even the burden of my own transformation. How do I use Baba in that too? And I remember once, I think Daddy giving this example in a class. If you're travelling on a train, you're travelling on a train, and you see someone who's in the train and the train's moving, but they're still standing carrying their baggage, right? What would you say to them? You'd say, well, put your bag down, the train's moving, the train's taking your baggage. Why are you standing there carrying your baggage? But that's exactly what we do. We sit there carrying our baggage, and Baba is moving the train of our life. And so when we learn to set down the baggage and let Baba move everything, then that is the point at which we begin to trust. Sorry, could I ask for the heater to be put on? I don't want to freeze. Is the heater on? Oh, it's on? Okay, I'm getting cold. So that's the point at which we can begin to trust. And trust is a very, very important thing. And I had a very beautiful experience in October. Had the fortune to be here because we had a dialogue of religious leaders, and that's a story in itself. It was a very, very wonderful event, something that I really feel Baba organised. And just a little aside, when we were preparing for it, it was like a new thing to be bringing these people to Madhuban in this sort of dialogue format. And there was a little bit of trepidation, because it's quite sensitive when you bring people of different faiths together. Those of you involved in that service will know about the sensitivities. But underneath that, I had this thing at the back of my mind. But, Baba's just going to add this feeling. Baba's just bringing people from here and there. He knows who he wants to bring. And when we stood up in front of Baba on the 21st, after the dialogue, then we were meeting Baba, of course, on the 21st October. Baba spoke to the group, and you would have seen it in Murli. And then second or third sentence, Baba says, Baba called this group. I was so touched. I said, well, of course Baba calls every group, I know. But I thought, yes, Baba, I know, I felt it. I really felt it when the process was going on. But it was very interesting because it was really one of the first times that I was going through a service program, and there was that, in that sense, that role of responsibility. Baba's responsible, but still, I remember Daddy Gosar defining Karan Karavan Har once. We generally say Baba's the one who works himself. He inspires others, to do, works through others, and works himself. But then she defined it as Karan Karavan Har, as Baba's the one who inspires, and then we do the work. So, there was that responsibility for the work. But as that was going on, because I knew that there could be so many things that would go this way and that way. You know what it's like in any service program, but especially in Madhuban, programs change every day. And that's why if you ask Sister Meera, can I have the week's program in advance in Madhuban, would you get it? She'd laugh. Impossible, because literally day by day things change. It's very, very spontaneous. Although of course there's all the systems and everything working, but the actual program is spontaneous. So I just knew that I have to do something so that I don't get affected at all by anything, because if I do, then my intellect won't work and it's just going to, be a mess. So it was, as I say, one of the first times as I was going through that service program that I really, really was doing work inside. Not hard work, but understanding what it is I had to do inside to keep that steady stage. And that feeling of that yogyurt feeling. And so I had 2 words that were going on inside that were not just words. Some people say, I remember once somebody saying in a talk somewhere, is it useful, that's right, it was a retreat at Oxford, is it useful when you're starting meditation to use affirmations? People use affirmations. I love myself, I'm good, I am powerful, people use that in the world. I said, well, just an affirmation like that is not really useful, it's very superficial. But if you're talking to yourself and saying something again and again, but as you say it, you have the full, deep meaning and awareness of it. That's not an affirmation, but that really is a deep spiritual practice. So in that sense, I had these 2 things going on in my mind. And the 2 words were dignity and trust. These 2 words. And I'd like to share it because it was a very pleasurable experience for me and maybe useful for others. So I just said to myself, I just have to stay in my own dignity. And rather than the word self-respect, I love, that word dignity is a very beautiful word. It's a whole concept. It means, it includes self-respect, of course, but it's much more. It's about, the royalty, the purity, being without desires. I'm not saying that I was just perfect all the time. I don't want to give that impression. Because of course you were adjusting and then just reminding yourself, but it really was a constant thing inside actually. To stay in your own dignity. It was a practice inside. And trust Baba, because whatever happens, Baba knows what he's doing. Whatever happens, trust the drama. It's accurate, it's fine. And this thing of trusting, it's just such a beautiful thing, because when you try and interfere with something, you realize it's a lack of trust. There's a situation today and afterwards I thought, no, it was a lack of trust, it wasn't right. Trying to put your own opinion in something, and things are moving, and yes, you can say things, you can discuss, but the attitude has to be one of everything is all right, everything will be fine, it's going to work out, there's no problem, no fear, no hesitation, no taking on of anybody else's karma either. trust also applies in this thing, in this too. One is in service, and it helps to take us into the unlimited. Really that deep trust, everything's going to work out. It has to. It's Baba's work. I mean, I know in London, as I've continued to be there, of course, more and more responsibility in a sense, using that word with the awareness that it's a role, not that it's a heaviness. And Baba is responsible, and it's been amazing for me that the more there's been that in my own self, I've become much lighter. And, sometimes I would laugh, and when situations would come up and maybe others were away, and then I'd have to deal with things, and I'd sit in Baba's room and I'd laugh and I'd say, Baba, look, if you've put me here, I'm the best you've got, and that's it. Whatever my limitations, it's up to you. You've got to do whatever. But just that carefree feeling that it's Baba's work. He has to put it right. He has to do whatever he has to do. But then in terms of my own self, one is when I make a mistake, I need to trust that Baba's going to put it right. Now that's a hard one. Because sometimes when I do something and I realize that it wasn't the right thing, a big thing or even just a little subtle thing, there's that little feeling of guilt, and you really wish that you hadn't done it or said it, and once you've said something, you can't stuff the words back in your mouth. They're out, And I'm always very careful when writing anything. We all now communicate on emails, right? And emails, so wonderful, but at the same time, they can really terrorize you as well when you get too many in a day. But I'm always very careful when I'm sending something in writing to someone. I'll always read it a second time, because it's so easy for something to be misinterpreted. And once it's in writing, once it's in words, that's bad enough. You can sort of explain around it. Once it's in writing, black and white, here, look, you wrote this. It's just, it can be like a weapon, So I'm always very careful that in communicating, whatever it is I have to communicate, that there shouldn't be any trace of any aggression or anger at all, or any hitting back at anything, any confrontation, but should really be filled with respect and filled with love. And talking about this thing of trust, that okay, even if I make a mistake, then in order to be able to move beyond it, I really need to at that moment, with trust, put it on Baba. That doesn't mean that I become careless. If I just say, oh, it doesn't matter, then no, Baba's not going to take that and help me, because then that's again just my own ego. And then what's going to happen as a result, that carelessness will mean that that mistake will multiply. I'll keep on making that mistake, and then that will become very visible. But if with humility and love, I realize I'm very honest with myself, and if necessary with Baba's instruments, look, this happened and this wasn't right, then at that moment when there's been that real honesty, and I really know what it is I have to learn from that, then I can be carefree and trust Baba, that Baba's then going to put everything right. And it's interesting that once I said this to Daddy, it was in a small gathering, and I said, Daddy, I see that you do make mistakes, little mistakes. Actually, I don't see them now, but years ago. Little things sometimes. But you never stop and you never worry about it. You just put a full stop and you move on. And she laughed. She said, yes, that's right. Just, she forgives herself, moves on, learns, full stop. That's it. Because it's not worth wasting our time. Move on, move on, move on, move on, move forward. That whole art of putting a full stop is very, very important. And so in that, we need to be, and Daddy was mentioning it in the class earlier, being to be lovely and to be pure, be accurate, alert, active. So we have to be very active, very alert, very accurate, and not careless. And then we really have the right to put it on Baba and to trust that Baba's then going to put everything right. But there has to be that honesty and accuracy in our stage. And then when there are situations that involve others, sometimes we do something and it becomes a trigger for a big reaction. I don't know whether you must have experienced that. It happens for you too. Somebody will make a comment. It'll be a very almost harmless, seemingly harmless comment. And there's a whole volcano that erupts inside. No? I had this recently with a situation. Boy, took me, it's just like overtook me, you know. And of course, really, although you were saying, well, that person said that, actually, they were the catalyst for something else inside. And I remember a story when there was a brother, Daddy was in Findhorn spiritual community in the UK, in Scotland. And Daddy had said, one brother come to see Daddy and said to her, I have a very close friend, and with good faith and good feelings, I gave advice to my friend, and he took that advice and things turned out very badly for him, and I feel very bad about it. And then Daddy talked to him. Daddy called his friend who was there too, and talked to the two of them and said to this other man, he's your friend, would he ever intentionally want to do anything wrong to you? And he said, no, not at all. I don't feel any, bad feelings in this situation. And then Daddy explained that, okay, he may have done that thing, and it became a catalyst for things to go wrong for that person, but that was the karma that was coming to him anyway. And so that person wasn't actually responsible. He did things with good faith, but that person's karma had caught up with them. And in the same way, that person says something, triggers a reaction, and they get my reaction, but it's actually my karma that's giving me that sorrow of my sanskars, whatever's built up inside me. And that's a very big thing to learn. And sometimes when we do something and then we feel guilty for a long time, we need to clean ourselves out and understand how the karmic laws are operating. And yes, if I really have said something wrong or done something wrong, to be very honest, to go and apologize, to not allow tension to build up, but then to trust that then I've done my best to put the situation right. Now there's no use in continuing the waste thoughts about it, and the guilt about it, and the worry about it. Full stop, move on, trust Baba. I've really discovered that to do that, it needs that trust. And I hadn't identified before that before for myself. Full stop, full stop, full stop. But what allows me anyway, what makes sense to me, is that I can put the full stop, and then the next, what is it with that implicit, is the trust in Baba and trust in the drama, so that you move on. Just the full stop on its own, it wasn't working. But full stop with trust, that's what has worked for me. Or as much as it can work, hopefully. It has been working. Trust, trust, trust. So all these things help us to move from the limited to the unlimited. These are some of the practical things that I've experienced in my life and my journey in that sense. And so coming back to where I was at the start, this thing of really first Baba and then everything else. Baba talked about that stage of being love-lean. so absorbed, so in that feeling of belonging. Baba is mine, I am Baba's. That stage of being so carefree, that stage of being so lost in love. And it's that stage, it's in that stage that it's possible to be an unlimited server. There are stages up to that, but that's the stage. I think many of you would have heard the stages Daddy defined when she was in Peace Village in June. She talked about being detached, being detached, being separate, being an observer, being a witness, and being up above. 5 stages. So detached, you first understand difference between you and the other thing, the attachments. Just in very quick essence, being separate, you then are able to build up your own stage separate to the influences. Being an observer, then she said you're able to start to give. Being a witness, everything on the basis of truth, totally untainted by anything around you. Up above, now I would now say love lean, that love lean stage, above any influence, any bias. I was very struck at 9/11. Daddy was asked for a message that we then put on the website and everything, you may remember it. And she used this phrase, it's very important not to be tempted to take sides, but to give light and might and love to everyone. Because people were taking sides. America did this, the Arabs did this, But which side would you go on? Who's right and who's wrong? There's vices everywhere. And so give the light and love and peace from God that every soul needs. And so to be up above, to be free, to be able to serve, and to not do things on the basis of other people's sanskars. This to me is a big key in terms of being an unlimited server. And sometimes people come to you and say, well, so-and-so's like that, so they shouldn't be allowed to do that. And why are they doing that? Look, just be loving, just accept. If you want that soul to transform, accept them, include them, love them, give. Don't start to make boundaries and rules and regulations. Yes, we need certain, I'm not saying just a free-for-all. Of course we need certain boundaries, people need boundaries, but don't do these things on the basis of their sanskaras, that they shouldn't be allowed to do this, but do it on the basis of what the real need of the soul is, and how you can really uplift that soul to another level. Be unlimited in your attitude always. And these are things that I've watched in the daddies, and these are things that when I've been able to practice them myself have given me that very beautiful feeling inside of really what is right and what does it mean to serve as much as possible in an unlimited way. It's another 10 minutes, so I thought I might leave a little space for any comments or questions, if there's anything anyone wants to share or say at all. Excuse me, I don't like to wear this on stage, but I need to put my hat on. Okay, any questions or, yeah, I have to lift it up to here. Yeah, could you stand up and speak out a bit? Okay, I'll repeat on the mic, but now there's a mic out for other people. Important to keep the mind free, but how do you do it? I recognize it, I know I have to do it, so how do you do it? And I think two things, because I can do it at times, I can just say, free mind. That's it. And the one thing, self-respect is really a basis for that. Because the whole thing of imagination and waste thoughts, when you get to the root of it, it's a lack of confidence somewhere inside, a lack of self-respect. Because that's where, it's all the waste thoughts. What should I do? How is it? Comparing, all of those things. These are mostly what our waste thoughts are about, actually. And so you really have to deeply tell yourself, what do I need to compare with and who do I need to compare with? Here I am in front of Baba's child. And just really put yourself in front of Baba. And, it takes courage to really give up those weak thoughts and those waste thoughts. It's a funny thing. They're the things that trouble us so much, and yet we're so attached to them because they're so comfortable. We know them. And we don't feel worthy enough to be without them. It's so peculiar on one level, but I understand because I know, of course, been through that, and and so I have to one day stand up and say, I'm just gonna do it. Really, because if you try to do it gradually, what are you going to do? One day have 10% less waste thoughts, and another day 20% less waste thoughts. Will that work? Once there's waste thoughts, there's an ocean of waste thoughts. Either they are or they aren't, And yes, if I am in that stage where there is self-respect, if waste thoughts come even a little, it'll be like, I remember once Dadiji saying this, that she feels that Baba's with her, she feels Baba's Karan Karavan, she's very carefree, and if there's anything wrong that she needs to pay attention to or something that she should be doing, she says, Baba gives me a red light, Baba gives me a red signal. So it's like she's so carefree, and Baba will signal her, look here, go there, whatever it is, so-and-so needs help, whatever it is. And it's a bit like, so her mind is so free, as it's a bit like, if I've really come into that stage where I have that self-respect, even if a little subtle lack of self-respect creeps in, it's then very noticeable, and I can quickly turn it around again. I won't stay with it. But if I'm not in that stage, how can I put it? If I'm in the stage of waste thoughts and I'm trying to get the glimpses of self-respect, it's struggle. But if I'm in that stage of self-respect, if a glimpse of a lack of self-respect comes, I'll turn it around and it'll be easy. Do you see? Is that clear? Yeah. So there has to come a point where it's okay now, Baba, I'm going to take that leap of faith and trust to really say, I am valuable, I am worthy. Really, really say it with feeling and belief and self-love, love for the self. And then your mind will start to be quiet. And then you can move on from there. And then you can really take Baba's love into yourself. Real love, not superficial love. Love that will penetrate your heart. Has that helped? Anything else? Time for one more question, probably? Or comment? Anyone? Yeah? Do you want to come to the mic?
I had the same question as the sister from Holland, but coming back on that aspect of imagination, very often when you have a wasted thought about someone else, it sometimes helps when you communicate with that person and you clarify that. Can you comment on that? To what level can we communicate, and in certain situations you just can't, or there's that tension with that person? Can you comment on that?
Sure, yeah, good question. I mean, I would just say, if there's a tension building up in a relationship, then as much as possible, find a way of communicating. Because if you don't, the tension builds up and up and up. And, have that aim to keep yourself so light, your relationship so light, that if something comes up, you can instantly go to anyone and say, hey, what did you mean that? I'm sorry, what did I do? But, if somebody says a comment, they insult you or something, then if you really, really don't want tension to build up, then you have to, of course, be very much in your self-respect and then not take in the sorrow, because the point is, once you take in the sorrow, that's when the tension comes, because then you feel so hurt that you don't know how to go to that person. Or if you go to them, you somehow escalate it because you react and get angry with them or whatever. So again, the trust, the self-respect, to be very much in your self-respect and say, but come with a lot of humility. If they said something to you, say, look, I'm sorry, did I do something wrong? Or acknowledge I did something wrong, try and repair it in some way. I mean, if you can, that's always the best thing to do, I feel. And that's where, particularly there's an interaction where you feel a tension and so on. But the other side is too but you must do that from a position of self-respect, not from a position of begging for their approval, because that's worse, and they'll actually put you down much, much more. I'm sure I've told this story before many times, but there was one particular soul I was working with, and she would just be so horrible to me, and to the extent that when I would come in the office and I say good morning, and she'd just turn her face in the other direction, and and I used to keep being nice to her, and she would just be worse to me, and I used to go crying to Daddy, all of that. And then one morning, I was sitting at my desk and looking at this person, and when you really have a clash of some scars with someone, it can be so, very, very, and you allow yourself to get drawn in, it can be very hurtful. And one day I looked across at her and I said, I don't know, just Baba's touching. I asked myself the question, what do I want from you? What do I need from you? I said, nothing. And in asking myself that question, usually when you ask a question, you know the answer already. And in asking the question, I suddenly saw myself, and I realized that I'd spent many months begging for her love and self and approval and everything. I'd really made myself a beggar. I'd really put myself right down there. And then that had fueled her, comments, whatever. So you have to have a lot of self-respect to go to a person, diffuse the tension, but be very detached. It has to be that detachment. And that's where you don't take in the sorrow. Sometimes we're just in a kind of general malaise of waste thoughts, We just think everybody is not approving of us. And then you can't go to every single person and say, am I doing okay? Do you like me? Then that's, then you really have to just sit down with yourself and work it out and come into that stage of self-respect, as I said. But if it's possible, you'll know yourself, and there are very specific situations where you feel there's a karmic account of some kind, and then, yes, to try to repair it. But okay, if that gets rejected, then just let go. Let go. Be very royal. Be very royal. and then really work at it just with vibrations and good wishes. And that really, really does help a lot. Because sometimes when someone's in a very negative state, then I get so caught up in their negativity that my own yoga, my own good wishes can't work. And sometimes I've just got to let go and just be detached and just forget it. And I remember one situation, there was one particular soul where I'd feel a tension from time to time. In many situations we get on fine, and then there'd be particular situations where I just feel she was very disrespectful and dismissive. And then one day she was talking to me and then telling me how, and I would feel that she was very hard-hearted somehow, and I had this impression of her, even though I knew her quite well. And then one day she was talking to me and saying how she feels so, if she feels she's hurt someone or done something wrong, she feels so upset inside. And of course she didn't show it, but she was telling me this is what went on. And it just gave me such a completely different picture of her. And I realized again, I'd been living in an imagination of what I thought she was like. And from that day, I've never had a bad feeling about her, ever. Even though still sometimes she'll make offhand comment. No ill feeling, because I understand that she doesn't have that motivation or intention inside. Now actually, I shouldn't actually need her to tell me that to be able to let go. I should be able to let go without that. But those instances just prove to you, so no, that's helped. I think it's time for yoga. So let's experience that powerful stage of unlimited service with Baba. Om Shanti. Thank you.